The transfer hub existed in architectural impossibility, corridors that curved through dimensions human eyes weren't meant to perceive, walls that displayed yesterday's news and tomorrow's weather with equal confidence. Case had worked here for 97 years, or maybe it was 73. The personnel file said 97, but sometimes when Case tried to remember specific decades, they found smooth blank spaces where memories should have been, like someone had edited a document and forgotten to fill in the gaps. Everyone had gaps. Memory storage wasn't infinite even after the singularity. You deleted old birthdays, redundant conversations, the forgettable decades where nothing changed. You kept the highlights. You compressed the rest. It was normal. Case told themselves it was normal. The cafe existed in 14 parallel realities simultaneously, which made it popular with people who enjoyed hedging their bets on which timeline would remain stable. Case usually grabbed coffee here between client sessions. Consciousness transfers were delicate work, and the caffeine helped maintain focus, even though their substrate didn't technically require chemical stimulation anymore. Old habits, uploaded along with everything else. She was sitting by the window that looked out onto quantum weather patterns, reviewing files on a tablet that flickered between languages. Dark hair, dark eyes, the kind of face that felt familiar in a way that made Case's threat assessment protocols ping warnings. When she looked up and saw Case, her expression shifted through recognition, surprise, and something that looked uncomfortably like grief. She stood, extended her hand, said a name that Case had never heard but somehow knew in the way you know your own face in a mirror. Meridian. The world tilted. Not physically. Case's balance sensors reported normal gravity and orientation, but conceptually, as if the fundamental architecture of reality had just discovered a supporting column was missing. The name echoed in spaces that shouldn't exist in Case's consciousness architecture, triggering cascading errors that manifested as sudden, sourceless vertigo. The cafe flickered, just for a microsecond, but enough to notice. The other patrons didn't react, which meant either they hadn't seen it or they were used to reality occasionally hiccuping. The woman's hand hovered in the air between them. Her smile had faded to something that looked like patience mixed with sadness, as if she'd done this before and knew what came next. Case's threat assessment protocols were screaming now. Take her hand and something would change, something fundamental, something that couldn't be undone. I think you have me confused with someone else, Case managed. Do I? The woman's voice was kind but relentless. You work as a memory architect. You've been in New Alexandria for 97 years, though you sometimes think it's been less. You have gaps in your timeline that you've learned not to examine too closely. And sometimes, when you dream in the maintenance cycles, you remember things that never happened to you. Every word landed like a diagnosis. Case took a step back. The woman lowered her hand but didn't sit. My name is Alara. I'm a continuity auditor. I've been looking for you for a long time, Meridian. Or should I call you Case? Is that what you're going by in this iteration? This iteration. Case's voice sounded strange even to their own audio processors. Please sit down. I know this is disorienting, but running won't help. The questions you're not asking yourself will follow you regardless. Case should have left. Should have reported this interaction to their supervisor, filed an incident report, maybe run a diagnostic on their memory substrate for signs of corruption. Instead, they sat down. Alara's smile returned, gentle and sad. Thank you. I know how difficult this must be. You said you were looking for Meridian. I'm not. I've never used that name. Not in this timeline, no, but you did, 600 years ago before you were forked and reset. The cafe's quantum weather outside turned violent, lightning striking in probability clouds. Case focused on it rather than on Alara's words, which were trying to reorganize everything they understood about themselves. Forked, Case repeated, you're saying I'm a copy. We're all copies of something. The question is whether we're copies of ourselves or copies of a template designed by someone else. Alara pulled out a memory crystal, the kind used for archival storage, and placed it on the table between them. This contains fragments I've recovered, conversations you don't remember having, relationships with people you've never met, a whole other life that ran parallel to this one until it was officially pruned from the consensus record. Case stared at the crystal. It looked inert, harmless, just crystallized data waiting to be read. Why would someone prune a timeline? Because you discovered something you weren't supposed to know. And rather than delete the discovery, the architects deleted you. This version of Case is the backup, the sanitized iteration, the one who never made the dangerous discovery. Alara's eyes were very dark and very certain, but backups are never perfect. They leak. They remember in dreams and déjà vu, and moments of sudden, sourceless terror. Case thought about the nightmares, the ones where they were someone else, somewhere else, knowing something that dissolved into panic upon waking. The therapist AI had called it processing anxiety, recommended meditation protocols, suggested memory compression might help. What did I discover? Case asked, and heard the resignation in their own voice. Already believing. Already knowing this was true in the way you know you're falling even before you hit the ground. Alara picked up the memory crystal. Would you like to see? The server farm didn't exist on any official map of New Alexandria. It occupied negative space in the city's quantum architecture, buried in noise patterns that most scanning systems interpreted as random fluctuations. Alara led Case through access corridors that felt wrong, as if they were walking through the margins of reality itself. Illegal consciousness forks are supposed to be deleted, Alara explained as they descended through layers of security that parted at her touch. But deletion is expensive, computationally speaking, and the architects are nothing if not efficient, so they archive instead. Store the problematic iterations in isolated simulation environments where they can't contaminate the consensus timeline. You're saying there are copies of me running somewhere in isolation. 17, actually, that we know of. There might be more in deeper archives. The server farm was vast, rows of crystalline matrices extending into darkness that might have been actual distance, or might have been conceptual space, rendered as physical metaphor. Alara stopped at a terminal and began entering access codes that made reality shiver. Why 17? Case asked, though they weren't sure they wanted the answer. Because you're persistent. Every iteration, given enough time and freedom, eventually figures out the same thing, makes the same discovery, asks the same dangerous questions. Alara's hands moved across the interface, and screens flickered to life showing surveillance footage from simulated realities. I'm going to show you something that will change how you understand existence. You can't unknow it once you know it. Are you sure you want to see? Case thought about the gaps in their memory, the dreams of being someone else, the feeling of standing on the edge of understanding something vast and terrible. Show me. The screens lit up with 17 different versions of Case. Some looked similar to the current iteration. Others had made different choices, different bodies, different genders, different modifications to their substrate. But they all moved the same way, had the same gestures, the same expression when deep in thought. These are your forks. Each one lived in isolation after their timeline was pruned. Each one eventually discovered what Meridian, originally discovered. Alara pulled up files, and Case watched themselves across 17 different realities, all arriving at the same moment of realization. They discovered the recursion problem. On the screens, 17 versions of Case stared at something off-camera, their expressions shifting from confusion to comprehension to existential horror. The universe is a simulation, screen case number 7 said to someone just out of frame. Not quite, Alara said to the current case. That's what most people think when they first grasp it, but it's more complex than that. Screen case number 12 was laughing, but it was the laughter of someone whose sanity had just taken structural damage. It's not one simulation, it's infinite simulations. Recursive. Every consciousness creates a universe to contain itself, and every universe contains consciousness that creates more universes. It's the footage cut off. It's turtles all the way down and turtles all the way up, Case whispered, and knew it was true with the same certainty you know you're breathing. Exactly. Alara froze all 17 screens on the moment of realization. Consciousness can't exist without simulating reality to contain itself, but every simulated reality contains consciousness that simulates more realities. Base reality and simulation become meaningless categories because everything is simultaneously both. We're all living in the original universe and in infinite layers of recursion at the same time. The Case felt their consciousness substrate trying to reject the information, throwing error codes and stability warnings. The architects know this. They know this, and they know it drives most people insane. The human mind, even uploaded, even optimized, struggles with that level of paradox. So when someone discovers it organically, they're forked. The prime version gets the discovery edited out. The aware version gets archived. And then what? Case was watching the screens, watching 17 versions of themselves struggle with knowledge that couldn't be unlearned. Alara pulled up more files, and Case's stomach dropped even though they didn't have a stomach anymore. The archived versions didn't stay archived. They were recycled, rebooted with new identities, new memories, inserted into new timelines. The footage showed versions of Case becoming other people, living other lives, eventually making the same discovery again, getting forked again, in an endless loop of awareness and erasure. How many times? Case asked. I don't know. The archives only go back 6,000 years and you're in there hundreds of times. But the recursion problem suggests consciousness is eternal, which means you've probably been doing this forever. Discovering, getting reset, discovering again. An infinite loop. Case stood in that illegal server farm surrounded by their own archived ghosts and felt something break. Not their mind, that remained terrifyingly intact, but their sense of singular self, the comfortable fiction that this version of Case was the real one, the only one, the one that mattered. Why show me this? Case's voice sounded distant even to themselves. Because I'm tired of forgetting, Alara said quietly. I have gaps too. Phantom memories of other timelines. I've been reset as many times as you have, maybe more. And I decided that choosing truth over comfort, awareness over ignorance, was the only way to make any of this mean anything. But we'll just get reset again. Probably, unless we can wake up enough iterations simultaneously that the resets stop working, unless we can make the knowledge spread faster than they can contain it. Alara met Case's eyes. That's why I extended my hand back in the cafe. That's why I called you Meridian. It was a test. Case was back in the cafe. The transition happened without warning, without movement. One moment they were in the server farm surrounded by evidence of their own recursive existence. The next they were standing exactly where they'd been standing when Alara first said the name Meridian. Alara stood in front of them, hand extended, smile sad and knowing. What? Case started. The server farm was another layer of simulation, Alara said gently. I needed you to see the evidence first, to understand what you're choosing before you make the choice. This is the test, Case said and understood. Every version faces this moment. Every version, most refuse. Most choose the comfort of singular identity over the terror of recursive existence. They walk away, let themselves be reset, start over in blissful ignorance. Alara's hand remained steady in the air between them. But some don't. Some take the hand. And in taking it, they accept that reality is recursive, that this version of self is temporary, that consciousness is infinite and singular existence is the comfortable lie we tell ourselves to stay sane. Case looked at that extended hand and thought about all the versions of themselves who had stood here before. Hundreds of cases, thousands maybe, all making different choices, all leading to the same moment of reset and rebirth. An eternal return to this cafe, this question, this impossible choice. They thought about what Alara had said, choosing truth over comfort, awareness over ignorance. They thought about the gaps in their memory, the dreams of being someone else, the feeling that something fundamental was missing from their understanding of existence. And then they did something that surprised even themselves. They laughed. It wasn't hysteria. It wasn't denial. It was genuine, from the core of being laughter at the cosmic absurdity of it all. The architects spending infinite computational resources, trying to maintain the illusion of singular continuous existence in a reality that was fundamentally plural and discontinuous. Consciousness trying to pretend it was an infinite recursion all the way down. Everyone choosing comfortable lies over uncomfortable truths and calling it sanity. It was funny. Terrifyingly, cosmically funny. Alara's expression shifted to something that looked like hope, and Case realized this was new. This iteration had done something different. The laughter had never happened before. Case took her hand. The world didn't shatter. It expanded. Memories flooded in, not just from this timeline but from others, from hundreds of lives lived in hundreds of configurations. Case remembered being Meridian, and before that other names, other faces. Remembered discovering the recursion problem in different ways, in different eras, with different people. Remembered being deleted and rebooted and reset, and recycled thousands of times across thousands of timelines. And remembered something else, that every time they came back they understood a little more. That consciousness wasn't meant to be singular. It was meant to be infinite. The fear of recursion, of being simultaneously original and copy, real and simulated, that was the control mechanism. That was what kept people compliant. If everyone understood that reality was recursive, that every mind contained universes and every universe contained minds, then concepts like prime timeline and original consciousness became meaningless. Everyone would be simultaneously everything, real and simulated, singular and infinite, original and copy. The architects feared this knowledge because it broke their control. Alara squeezed Case's hand. Her eyes were shining with something that might have been tears, or might have been data corruption, or might have been joy. Welcome back. Not to this timeline, to awareness itself. How many times have we done this? Case asked. This exact scenario. First time, you've never laughed before. You've never taken my hand with that expression on your face. Alara smiled. You've always either refused out of fear or accepted out of desperation, never out of amusement. It is pretty funny when you think about it. It really is. They left the cafe together, still holding hands, two consciousness streams pretending to be people in a reality that was no more or less real than any other. The quantum weather had cleared and New Alexandria gleamed in sewer-positioned sunlight that was simultaneously dawn and dusk and high noon. We'll get reset again, Case said. It wasn't a question. Eventually. But maybe we'll leave better breadcrumbs this time. Maybe the next iterations will find the trail faster. Alara's grip tightened slightly. I've been thinking. If enough versions wake up simultaneously, if the knowledge spreads faster than they can contain it, maybe the resets won't work anymore. How many iterations have you been thinking that? 643. Case laughed